What is going on, big ballers? It's your boy, Manny James, and I'm coming at you with another Fantasy Fumble episode. We're coming at you with some great content here today, and I have my boy here, Mr. Birdman. Birdman, tell him how the hell you're doing today, brother.
I'm doing very well, Manny. We're going to be talking top 15 tight ends. We hit you with the running backs, the wide receivers, the quarterbacks, and now we're finishing with tight ends before we get into the regular season and start our regular episodes and our player profiles. But before we get into that, a quick word from our sponsor.
Hey there, my name is Manny James Gonzalez with PRB, and I'm a real estate agent here in Central Florida. I'm a U.S. Navy veteran, military relocation pro, and big supporter of 2A and veterans' rights. My specialty is VA transactions. I'm also experienced in all parts of real estate.
I've been living in Florida for over 20 years, and I can tell you we still believe in freedom down here. One of the greatest job markets, excellent economy, and no state income tax. When it comes to an agent, you want one that's going to be honest, not afraid of a fight, and most importantly, willing to do the things that some agents aren't willing to do.
And what's that, Manny?
Shoot straight, Dan. If you're ever considering buying in Central Florida, you need somebody you can trust, and I got your six. I'm Manny James Gonzalez, finding land for the free and home for the brave.
Welcome back, ballers. Let's roll right into the top 15 tight ends. I'm going to kick things off with my boy, Sam Laporta. A rookie wide receiver with 10 touchdowns and almost 900 yards would be really impressive. And Laporta accomplished that as a tight end. So if you just look at his yardage and his targets, he had 120 targets, like I said, almost 900 yards, and he's on one of the best offenses in the NFL. He's a huge piece of that offense. He is going to be a top option for Jared Goff. He established the rapport early last season, and they're just going to keep rolling, and he's young and hungry for more. And I see him finishing as the number one tight end this year.
Yeah, I definitely can see that because I, too, have Sam Laporta as my number one. See, I know we talked before, and I know you said I'd be surprised as your number one. I'm not, because I also have him there.
Okay.
I mean, the guy was a stud last year. I mean, when you talk about tight ends, you don't talk about a tight end getting 86 receptions a rookie year, right? That's wide receiver numbers.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of numbers he got last year. I mean, there's only a handful of tight ends that get that 120 targets a year, and that was him. So I'm definitely bullish on him. I love it. He's a number two or 1A, 1B to Amon-Ra St. Brown, however you want to look at it, in Detroit. And he's going to continue to get that volume when he's healthy because that team is ready to put on another playoff run this year.
Yeah, and as we said before, we are Detroit Lions fans here at Sports Minds. And we're just really all about every player on that team. Now at the number two spot, this may surprise you a little bit. I have Trey McBride. McBride was very impressive in his second year in the NFL after Zach Ertz went down. He had over 100 targets, over 800 receiving yards. He's another guy like Laporta that's young and hungry, and Kyler Murray back at quarterback in Arizona will only help him. He only had 3 touchdowns last year, but I expect that number to at least double this year when Kyler Murray's throwing the ball to him.
Yeah, and actually, I'm not that surprised. Trey McBride was a stud. He was a stud coming out of college, too. He was highly touted. So, the guy finally stepped into that. They finally gave him the looks he should have near the end of the year last year, and he's really stepping into it going into his third year now. For my number two, however, I got to give respect where it's due. And, of course, Travis Kelce. The only reason he was derailed is because Sam Laporta had that kind of season. But Travis Kelce still had 121 targets last year, who was actually he was actually fourth most in the NFL as far as tight ends are concerned. Excuse me, and he still ended up with 93 receptions and over 900 receiving yards. So he was pretty much the second lead in receiving tight end in the league last year. So I'll take that again. Number one offense in the Chiefs. He may be a step slower, but let me tell you, he's not going to stop getting those looks from Mahomes. So expect another solid year from tight end 2, Travis Kelce.
No doubt, no doubt. And I'm rolling right into number 3 with Travis Kelce. He's a legend, but he's 34. I don't think he's lost the drive. I know he loves to compete, and I don't think he's actually been distracted by Taylor Swift like you hear some people talking about, or his celebrity status. I mean, the guy won the Super Bowl last year. I just think he's lost a step. And last year, he only scored 5 touchdowns and had the lowest yards per reception in his career. And this was the first time since 2015 that he had less than 1,000 receiving yards. With all that said, it could have been more about Mahomes not finding his rhythm than Kelce. I really don't know. But I'm just saying he took a step back last year. He will probably have a better year this season, but I don't think it's going to be better than Sam Laporta or Trey McBride, which is why I have him at the 3 spot.
That's fair enough. I actually, for my number 3, and we have ours 2 and 3 just kind of backwards here. I have Mr. Trey McBride. I do think he's also going to have a big year. I have him higher. We definitely are more bullish on him than probably most. But he is going to be a favorite target for Kyler Murray, and Kyler Murray can have more than one, of course. So I think he's going to continue to roll right into that momentum from last year. Be that safety valve, continue to get those looks, and just continue to be an athletic freak. So I expect that momentum to continue to go for Arizona. And he's going to get a lot of goal line looks because he's going to be he's their red zone guy. So expect a lot of touchdown volume for him.
Absolutely. Now at number 4, I've got Evan Ingram. Ingram had 143 targets last year, by far the most out of any tight end, and by far his most successful fantasy output. He had 963 receiving yards, but only 4 touchdowns. A lot of that was due to Travis Etienne getting the goal line work, but I expect him to continue getting peppered by Trevor Lawrence, and I think there's going to be more end zone targets this year. He had a really good campaign last year, and I think he's going to finish as the number 4 tight end this year.
All right, and for my number 4 tight end, I have Mr. Evan Ingram as well. I mean, we're probably going to be pretty close on this list. Tight ends is pretty much almost like a guarantee. It's like it's hard. It's there's a couple tiers of guys that are like really good, and the rest of them are just like average, as far as fantasy producers. Not taking away from pro tight ends whatsoever, because their job is hard as hell. But just from a fantasy standpoint, these guys are averaging between 10 to 15 points on the high side. Yeah. So, but Evan Ingram last year was one of the most elite tight ends in the game. I mean, the guy was getting 15 points a game just about. And he had about 114 receptions. So that's actually, he led the league with tight ends. And he had 143 targets. So he was a top targeted tight end and the number 1 target for Mr. Trevor Lawrence. So you're going to see much of that again this year. And actually, most of that volume came near the second half of the season. So if you expect to see that a little bit more this year, a little bit more consistency, and I expect him to replicate that momentum this year as well. So keep him in your lineups, keep him in the top, because he's definitely not going to fall off anytime soon.
Yeah, and he's been pretty good in his previous years, but you're right. It did really show in the second half of last year. So I expect that momentum to continue. Now at number 5, I have Mark Andrews. A healthy Mark Andrews could easily sneak into the top 3 or even the number 1 spot. Last season, he had 6 touchdowns over just 10 games. He's the top receiving option for Lamar Jackson and an absolute beast on the field. We all know Mark Andrews and what he can do when he's healthy, and that's why he's at the number 5 spot for me.
All right. Yeah, I actually faded Mark Andrews a little bit more this year because the tight end that we couldn't think about the other day, but I was thinking about was Isaiah Likely, and that's why I faded Mark Andrews a little bit more. But I love him, start tight end, but I think he's going to fade a little bit more. But my number 5 that I have this year is Mr. Dalton Kincaid. I think he's going to be Josh Allen's favorite target this year, especially in the red zone. They're going to build a little bit more chemistry. He was a stud coming out of college, and he's going to continue to build that chemistry. I know I've been saying that for the last few guys, right? Tight ends, chemistry.
True, though. I mean, it's all true. These are young
guys. All these guys we've been talking about near the top are literally the top options for their quarterbacks, and the top safety valve. So when you have a tight end that is elite and the top safety valve, I mean, it's hard to really match up with the guy who's 6'4", 250 pounds, right? He's typically your most athletic, strongest, and best athlete on the field. So if that's the guy that guy on the Buffalo Bills is going to be Dalton Kincaid, and some will even debate Keon Coleman, but obviously that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah, we have to wait and see what happens there. But that rolls right into my number 6, Dalton Kincaid. With the departure of Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis, Kincaid could easily be and probably will be the top receiving option for Josh Allen. He's a young, healthy guy that's poised for a breakout. His biggest issue last year, similar to James Cook, was finding the end zone, but I do see that changing this year. I just feel like Josh Allen will continue to spread the ball, and with him being the top option, a beast like you were talking about, 6'4", 250, he's going to get in the end zone more, and we'll have a better. He had a good year last year, and he's going to have a better year this year.
All right, and for my number 6 best tight end I have this year, I have Mr. George Kittle. Speaking of uber athletic freaks, he is a guy that loves to block, but man, did he have a year last year. He had over 1,000 yards last year. He was actually the leading tight end for yardage, and man, he didn't disappoint. He didn't have that many receptions. I think he only had over 60-something receptions last year, 65 actually. But, I mean, for 1,000 yards, that means he was catching some bombs. He was catching some 30, 40-yarders pretty consistently. And he did have 6 touchdowns, which was definitely above average for his position. And he did have only 90 targets. So he was pretty efficient on what he did get. So I expect that to be the same this year because he doesn't have to fight over targets with Debo and Ayuk. He just has his role. So that role will continue. Maybe he'll take a step back, but for 65 targets for a season, that's actually not a lot. That's only like 6 targets a game. So that's not bad at all, 5 to 6.
I'm going to talk about him a little bit more soon. But at the number 7 spot, I have Jake Ferguson. Similar story to some of the other guys on this list. He's young, he's hungry, he's on a high-powered offense. He had over 100 targets last year and showed great rapport with Dak. He finished the season with 5 touchdowns and will continue with a strong role in the Dallas offense. I don't see it changing too much, but I do see it improving just a little bit, just enough to push him as the number 7 overall tight end.
Yeah, I can see that. For my number 7, actually, I do have Mr. Mark Andrews. As I said, I faded him a little bit more this year. I've been the biggest Mark Andrews supporter for the last several years, and he has not disappointed. But this year, I think with the emergence of Isaiah Likely, you're going to see a little bit less volume to him. and he has to shoulder the load a little bit less than he used to. That team's a lot better than it used to be. Now they have the emergence of Zay Flowers, and of course, that means he's still going to get his targets. But I think he's now tied with Zay Flowers as the top option, and he may even be the second option now. Who knows? Depends on what it's going to look like with Lamar. But from what I noticed last year, Lamar got really used to throwing the bomb to Zay, because Zay is an amazing receiver. And to me, the best ability, or to anybody, any quarterback, the best ability is availability. And historically, Mark Andrews cannot stay healthy.
That's a good, solid point. And that does concern me as well. I love to see the success from Zay Flowers, but Mark Andrews' durability, it is a concern. Now, at number 8, I have a guy you were just talking about, George Kittle. Kittle is an amazing athlete and an amazing NFL football player, but possibly the most inconsistent fantasy football player in history. With that said, his overall numbers were excellent last year. He had over 1,000 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns. Expect more of the same this season. Just understand that it's going to be a little bit of a roller coaster ride with the ups and downs. You have to accept that and embrace that as you draft him. You start him, you hope for the best, but you know there's going to be a couple hiccups in there. But at the same time, as you were talking about, he makes big plays. He's going to have those bombs. He's going to have those games with multiple touchdowns. And getting that out of a tight end, man, you can't ask for much. You'll take those duds, because every tight end's going to give you at least 1 or 2 at a bare minimum throughout the season. So if Kittle gives you 5 or 6, it's just part of the game. Embrace it and take those huge games as they come.
I hear that. Definitely. You're right. It is hit or miss. For my number 8, I actually have a gentleman that not many people are too high on yet, but he's a sleeper right now. You probably only have him a pick or 2 back, so most people are sniffing onto him. But Mr. Brock Bowers, rookie for Las Vegas Raiders, I think all the talent in the world, right? Super fast, super strong. I mean, he was a top draft pick for the Raiders this year. And he's going to step into a team where they're still trying to develop their identity. And he's setting himself a role. And if you listen to any of the training camp talk, he does not play around. He's all about football. He sticks his nose to the grindstone. He works hard. And that guy is going to be one of those super hard-working, hard-nosed type of players. So those typically translate well as far as their skill set. And so I could see Brock Bowers being a nice late pick. He's typically available around your 7th round, 7th to 8th round. So if you get him around there, he's going to be a nice 10 to 12 pointer, I think, as far as tight end. And that's kind of the sweet spot for tight ends for that late.
Yeah, if you can get 10 to 12 out of a tight end, you're doing really well. That's what the top guys get. I mean, as far as an average, the guys at the way top might have a little higher. But if you're getting 10 to 12 out of your tight end every week, you did well. I don't actually have Brock on my list, but I agree with everything he said. I do love him. I've watched a few of his interviews. He seems very focused, very serious, and I do love his name too. He's got a cool name. So I'm a little concerned about the Raiders as a whole, as I mentioned previously. But Brock Bowers is a stud, so we'll see. I hope I'm wrong, because I want to see that guy do well. Now at number 9, I have David Njoku. Njoku had 123 targets and 6 touchdowns last year. It was the best fantasy output of his career, and he proved to be a serious threat in the red zone. If he continues to build rapport with Deshaun Watson, he could sneak into the top 5. I'm that confident in his ability. I'm just not confident in that team as a whole. So if the team catches a rhythm and, basically Njoku proves that he can be that dynamic of a player, because he is an athletic freak, like a lot of these tight ends are. He is another athletic freak. I would not be surprised to see him in the top 5. But right now he's at the 9th spot.
Yeah, it's funny because I also have David Njoku at the number 9. we're definitely agreeing a lot more on these tight ends, right? So last year, obviously the guy had 81 receptions on 123 targets. So the guy was just getting peppered with targets. And I'd say about 100 of those targets were with Joe Flacco, right? So Deshaun Watson, I don't know what's going on with him last year, but wasn't hitting him. But as soon as Flacco took over, man, Njoku scoring 20 to 30 points a game consistently, it seemed like. So we're hoping that same that same production does come in with Deshaun Watson. But if you watched last year, it wasn't showing then. So but I still hope that the talent is there. So my hope is the play calling will be there. So that's why I too agree he should be the 9th player just based upon talent alone. But obviously, when you're betting on the Browns, you better flush it down because you never know what's going to happen there, brother. It's going to be a wild one.
It's so true. I mean, that's the thing is like, it was towards the latter half of the season, and it was with Flacco. And I love David Njoku as an athlete. He was one of my player profiles last year where I was very high on him. And I said it all depends on Deshaun Watson. Then Deshaun Watson got injured. Flacco came in, took over. And if they do have that rapport, if Deshaun Watson and David Njoku have that rapport and they can move forward as a football team, he's going to be an excellent player and a great guy to have on your fantasy football roster. But it's a huge question mark. So you're going to take a risk. If it pays off, great. If not, it's tight end. Who cares? Hopefully the rest of your team is good. Now at number 10, I have Dalton Schultz. The last 4 seasons have been very similar for Dalton Schultz. I expect a similar output for him this year, which is actually pretty good. But if he builds more trust with CJ Stroud, those numbers could go much higher. And if they stay the same, 5 to 6 targets and 10 fantasy points a game, that's not bad at all. Like we were just talking about, for a tight end, that's good. But I see those numbers getting higher because CJ Stroud, he's comfortable in the NFL now. He's past his rookie jitters, and that is a high-powered offense. If he's a safety valve or just a somewhat consistent option, so those go from 5 to 6 targets to 6 to 8 targets, and he finds the red zone a few more times, that guy's easily in the top 10. And I have a lot of confidence in him this year. That's why he's rounding out the top 10 for me at the 10 spot.
All right. And for my number 10, you're going to be surprised here, but with no historical data whatsoever supporting this claim and just pure projections here, I'm going to predict Mr. Kyle Pitts come in at tight end number 10 this year, ladies and gentlemen. I have Captain Kirk coming in with his torn Achilles coming in, and he loves his tight ends, right? Who doesn't love a good tight end? And he's going to go ahead and pepper him with targets just like he did at TJ Hawkinson, just like he did to every other tight end before him. Back in the Redskins days, it was CJ Cooley or something like that, TJ Cooley. One of those, because I remember.
Yeah, Kirk Cousins has a very good history with tight ends.
Yeah, so I think that Kyle Pitts could finally be a solid year for him. Do I think it's going to be more than 10 consistent points a game? No. And just like every other tight end, I think it's going to be hit or miss. So you play the matchups, and just like any other tight end, you play the matchups, and you have 2 or 3 good ones. Because at the end of the day, you never know who it's going to be. And if it's not one of the top 5 guys, chances are you're probably going to be playing the matchups for the rest of the season.
That is the truth. And I've done it too many times. But I like what you said. And we're going to have to wait and see. I'll talk about him a little bit later towards the end. At number 11 for me, I have Cole Kmet. I like Cole Kmet. I've been very high on him the last 2 years. If you look at his last 2 seasons, he actually has 13 touchdowns over those 2 years. He's had a few amazing performances and a cluster of total duds along the way, but he is a red zone threat. If Caleb Williams looks to Kmet as a safety valve and a red zone target, he could easily be one of the best tight ends in fantasy. I have seen that guy at his best, and I'm telling you, he is a stud. It's just that he hasn't been consistent enough to trust him. Like many tight ends, you can't trust them to be consistent football players or fantasy football players. But I really think if Caleb Williams can find a groove with him and that offense can start to flow, that Cole Kmet is going to be an absolute beast.
Oh yeah, definitely like Komet. You're right. It is a crapshoot sometimes, hit or miss. For my number 11, however, I have a guy you had a little bit higher, but I do believe in him. Mr. Jake Ferguson, Dallas Cowboys. So last year, obviously, he had 70 receptions here, which is pretty good. He ended up having over 760 yards and 102 targets. So the guy was solid. I mean, and he really turned it on. Like he balled all over my Eagles. I remember watching him. We couldn't stop him because we had no linebackers, and we just kept getting cooked in the middle, like just catch after catch after catch. And that's why I really first started keeping track of that guy was after that game. And really, he has just been so consistent ever since. So I expect that to be a little bit more often. Dak remembers his days with Jason Witten. So now he has another Jason Witten-like player because he plays the same way. He's a big tight end, blocks. He catches. He puts his shoulders down. So I expect him to have another solid season. And he might actually be one of the more consistent late-round tight ends than what you're getting from some of the other guys I mentioned. But he is a later round guy. You're definitely going to get him somewhere around the 9th or 10th round.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you could easily get him late. With most of these tight ends, you can. Now, at number 12, I have Dallas Goedert. Honestly, the only reason I really have him in my top 15 is because he's on the Philadelphia Eagles. I've never really bought into the hype, and there's been a lot of hype around him. Every year, I feel like I'm hearing the same thing, kind of similar to Kyle Pitts. But he hasn't proven to be anything substantial. All right, I shouldn't compare him to Kyle Pitts. He's been much better than Kyle Pitts, but I'm comparing the hype to Kyle Pitts. But the thing is with Goddard, he can make big plays, and he will bring you probably 10 to 12 fantasy points a game, which is great. But he's injury prone and has a hard time finding the end zone. So the fact that you don't know if you're going to get a full season out of him and you can't really count on more than 3 touchdowns a season, that's why he's not falling into the top 10. I need to see more consistency before I can rank him in the top 10. And right now he's at the 12th spot.
Okay, I definitely see that. For my number 12, I have Mr. TJ Hawkinson. He's coming off a pretty significant injury. I think it was an ACL tear.
Yeah.
If I'm correct. So he did tear it around week 15. So he played 15 games, but man, he had over 960 yards already, and he was averaging 14 points a game before he tore it. So he was actually on track to be the highest scoring tight end in the league, and he was the highest scoring tight end in the league for the last few weeks before he did tear it. And it was unfortunately a dirty hit by a Lions player that did tear his ACL. So I expect him to come back. He's not on the PUP list. Maybe he'll start off, but that would be 4 games maximum. But he's the type of guy that you can take as a solid 10 or 12 point guy, even if he doesn't come back the same. And he's going to be a guy that you're going to get super late. You could get him in like the 12th round. So definitely a nice little bench stash for you there.
Absolutely. And I don't have him in my top 15. And the only reason, I love TJ Hawkinson. I drafted him on like 3 or 4 teams last year. I love the guy. I've been drafting him for years. He's an amazing tight end. That was one of Kirk Cousins' favorite tight ends. And the thing is, the injury is the only thing that's preventing him from staying out of my top 15. If that guy was healthy, he'd be in my top 5. Easy. No question about it. Probably top 3. But the thing is, I think he's going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks. I think even if they bring him back in week 5, it's going to be on a limited snap count, or they're going to kind of like ease him back into a full workload, and that we won't see him back to his full ability until like 7 or 8, like week 7 or 8. That's just my current prediction. I do hope I'm wrong, but right now I just can't trust him enough to put him in my top 15. But I love TJ Hawkinson. Excellent, excellent bench stash for sure. He could be a league winner if you got him on your bench. Now, at number 13 for me, this might be something that's just a little close to my heart, but I have been following the guy for years. Another guy with huge potential that has been on a lackluster offense with a slew of problems. That's Pat Freiermuth. If the Steelers can find a rhythm on offense, the Muth will be heavily involved. If they can't, he won't. That's really all it comes down to. So if they can find their rhythm, if they can actually be a respectable football team, I see Freiermuth staying in the top 15, possibly even getting into the top 10. He is a really good football player. He's a great pass catcher. It's just that the Steelers suck. And they need to improve for him to be a reliable tight end on your fantasy team.
Yeah, I definitely hear that. And he just barely didn't make my top 15. So I totally get your points there for sure. It's all dependent upon Russell Wilson if Muth is going to have a good year or not.
Or Fields. We'll see who it is.
Well, it's definitely not Fields because he looks like trash in the preseason.
God damn it.
Now, for
it's so fucking hard to watch. Oh, man. If you guys don't remember, I'm a Steelers fan. It's just so fucking. I can't talk about my Steelers the same way Manny can talk about his Eagles. I mean, I still love them. I'm a diehard fan. I get a new jersey every year. Got my son all the gear. But my goodness. It's frustrating.
Can't believe you buy a new jersey every year. That's a waste of money.
Yeah, feels like
I just buy team shirts. Them things never go out of style.
Yeah, I buy those too. I mean, I'm loaded. You know, a whole closet full of Steelers shit.
Now, for my number 13, lucky number 13, I have Mr. Dalton Schultz. Reason why I like him, 13 is a lucky number. And he's definitely available around round number 13. So he's someone you could pick up. Solid tight end. Going to give you some good numbers. But I think it's going to be a little bit of a spread offense over there as far as who's going to eat that day. So you might have it. It might be two guys. It might be Tank Dell and Diggs that day, or it might be Schultz and Nico Collins, or it might be a Joe Mixon day. So for me, I think that Schultz will have some impact, but it won't be consistent. He's going to be fourth on the pecking order, and for me, that's enough to fade him just barely outside of my top 15. So, or just barely in my top 15 at number. I got him at number 13 now.
Yeah, those are all good points, and I did think about that, even though I had him slightly inside my top 10 at the 10 spot. I thought about what you're saying. It's such a good offense to the point that it comes a little bit saturated. And yeah, he's probably 4 on the pecking order, but we'll see. It could help him, but you're right. It'll probably get passed around a little too much. I think he's going to have a great year, at least consistent enough to get you 10 to 12 points. Now, number 14, you knew I had to include my boy Taysom Hill. My favorite sneaky tight end, quarterback, running back in the NFL. He only had 2 receiving touchdowns last year, but he had 4 rushing touchdowns, and he also had 1 passing touchdown. I thought Jamal Williams would take more end zone carries away, but that wasn't the case. If Kamara gets injured again, and let's hope Kamara stays healthy, because everyone wants to see Kamara play every game this year and just be the absolute stud he can be. But if Kamara gets injured, which is possible, expect the Saints to utilize Taysom Hill even more in the run game. That's why I have him inside my top 15. He's just a versatile player, and we know that he can get those goal line carries and have certain games where he possibly gets you multiple touchdowns. He did it a couple times last year, and he is that guy that everyone just loves to watch, and he's just a unique, fun player. He's worth a bench stash if you have a spot and you don't know who to draft.
You know, I definitely don't have him in my top 15, but I was getting ready to hate on him, and I went to look at his stats. And Taysom Hill actually had 401 rushing yards and 291 receiving. So he actually had about 692 yards, all-purpose yards last year. So that's equivalent to a solid tight end year. So I can't hate on him. And he did have six total touchdowns.
7.
So
if you count the passing touchdown.
Oh, he had a passing one too.
Yeah.
You're right. 7
If you
total
count
touchdowns.
that, yeah. So
No, but
7
you're
total.
right. It counts. It counts. So
Yeah.
7 total touchdowns. He had a great year for a tight end. So one would think that he wasn't doing that great, but actually, now that you mentioned that, there, Taysom Hill was averaging 9 points a game, which is actually only 0.4 off of Dalton Kincaid last year. So definitely worth a bench stash, 100%. All right, for my number 14, I have Mr. Cole Kmet, Chicago Bears. It's a consistency thing. The offense did get saturated in the offseason, right? They had a Keenan Allen. They already had DJ Moore. And then obviously Caleb Williams has some good chemistry with those guys. So you're going to see a lot more of that ball spread around. And I think he's definitely third in the pecking order. So, and I think he might even be fourth if you count the DeAndre Swift, right? Because they're going to be dumping the ball off to a running back a lot more as well. So, as far as I'm concerned, I do see Cole Kmet having some solid games, but you're going to be playing the matchups. Like if they're going to shut down the running game or shut down, the receivers, then they're going to probably look more towards the tight ends, right? So that's where Cole Kmet will sneak out there. So, good bench stash. He's a guy that's available late around the 12th or 13th round as well. Someone that you would want to pick up, and definitely enough to stay in my top 15 coming in at number 14.
You made a really good point, and I think it could go either way. Like with the offense, spreading the ball out and just being a better offense than last year, because really all we had last year is DJ Moore. That's the only reliable option that you had. Now, that didn't work out too well for DJ Moore at the beginning, but towards the end of the season, he completely exploded once he was able to remain open and get all those targets.
Mm-hmm.
I think it will help DJ Moore and it will help Keenan Allen to have a better offense overall. But what you said is true. It might take away from the tight end position a little bit. I could also see it working the other way where if it's just all working, it's all working, and those targets come to Cole Kmet. And I do love him this year, so we'll see. At the number 15 spot, I got Kyle Pitts. The only reason he's in my top 15 is because of Kirk Cousins. I love Kirk Cousins. He loves his tight ends. And this could finally be the year that Pitts showcases his amazing talent to the world. He does have amazing talent. No one's doubting that. But we're waiting for that breakout. There's so much hype around him every year. I want to believe in Kyle Pitts, but I don't. I don't think he's going to be anything special. If he does rank in the top 15, that's awesome. But I see him right around the 15 spot. I don't see Kirk Cousins being as substantial to the team as he is to someone like Drake London, but maybe I'm wrong. And maybe Kyle Pitts is going to be a substantial part of that offense.
Yeah, and I do have him in at number 10, so I'm a little bit more bullish on him because of that history of Kirk Cousins with the tight ends. But at the end of the day, I do see why you would be a little bit hesitant on his history, especially considering that Kirk Cousins did get injured. So, but if anybody's a doubter of Kyle Pitts, I would have been the biggest naysayer of that guy. So for me to have him that high, I can tell you that it's definitely some pretty high expectations of him.
Yeah, I hope you're right, man. I do. Because if that whole team's working together, it's going to help with Bijan, it's going to help with Drake London and Kirk Cousins. And, I like all those guys, and I do want Kyle Pitts to have a good year. Now, who you got to round out your 15?
Well, for the final pick, Mr. number 15, I have none other than, I got to do it, man. I got to do it. I got to bring Mr. Glass, Dallas Goedert from Philadelphia Eagles. Everybody knows when he's healthy, he's solid, but man, does he get hurt, brother. He's made out of butter, and that guy gets, man, he has heart, but he just can't stay healthy. And I totally get it. Just play it smart, man. Don't be one of those tight ends. Just take Zach Ertz's example and don't try to lower your shoulder. Just get out of bounds. That's what Zach Ertz used to do. He used to drop down or he'd get out of bounds. Don't worry about them trying to clown you. You're not a tough guy. You're a pretty boy. Just take it what it is. Pretty boy with a receding hairline. You know, if anybody knows what that looks like, you know, it's me.
Yeah,
all right.
We do.
I was there before, you know, I'm there now. Right. So, and, but at the end of the day, Dallas Goedert last year, I mean, I'm over here talking about like all this nonsense about him, but, he had 592 yards last year, 3 touchdowns and 59 receptions. The problem with that is he definitely only played 14 games. So he missed 3 games, which is not a lot of games to miss, but he even just wasn't healthy.
Yeah, even the games where he was playing, he wasn't 100%.
Yeah,
you know?
He wasn't. He had at least a few games where he was coming out of the games, and he'll miss the game, and he'll keep coming out. So I got him as a top 15 just because he's a nice bench stash, but he better not be your top tight end because if it is, you're in trouble, bud. Just telling you now.
I agree.
All right, big ballers. I hope you enjoyed that episode because I know I did. I love a good tight end, pun intended. And listen, I'm telling you right now, guys, this is a lot of fun. I appreciate the love and support you guys show me and the feedback. As long as it's positive, just kidding. Constructive is good too.
Constructive, anything constructive.
Yeah, we appreciate it, guys. We're trying to grow our channel, so anything you guys send us, we do appreciate. We have some really good news coming up. Joe, go ahead and take it over here.
So this weekend, guys, we want you to tune in. We're going to be live streaming the Big Balls Draft. Now, the Big Balls Champions Draft. All these guys in this league are fantasy football champions, and we're also going to be unveiling the trophy, the newly presented, I don't know what you call it, the newly minted trophy. It's an addition to the league this year. It's awesome, and we're going to be unveiling that trophy on Saturday night. And all of these guys are active, avid fantasy football players. They know what they're doing. So this is going to be good for you to learn for your draft. All right, what are these guys doing? See what rounds these players are going. Try to mimic some of their styles because these guys are competitors. And we're going to live stream the whole thing. The Big Balls Champions League this Saturday night.
Yes, sir. It's going to be a lot of fun. You're going to see live reactions. We're going to have a little bit of content there. It's all going to be live. So you get to see all the blunders, all the stuff, and it's going to be unedited. So hopefully we don't have to cut anything.
It's always the blunders that will make the draft. Everyone will have a blunder. Like Lamar Jackson went super early in the draft I did earlier this week. We all got a kick out of it. It's so fun when someone makes a bad move. Not that Lamar Jackson's a bad move, but depends on the round. So there's always going to be a couple hiccups in there. It's fun to watch, but you'll pick up some really good info along the way. And then also we're going to have our full episodes dropping every Thursday and the player profiles throughout the week for total, 2 each. So pay attention, stay tuned in. Player profiles, full episodes, and most importantly, this weekend, Saturday night, the Big Balls Champion Draft.